What's happening, everybody? Happy Friday afternoon. Charlie Waymeyer here, Ultimate Studios Inc. Welcome back to the studio. I thought it was a little long overdue for a Consoleside Chat again. Just talk about gear, recording. Anybody got some good jokes? Any of that sort of thing? Bring it on. Let's just talk, have a good time, answer some questions and whatnot. Oh man, I hope this camera stays in focus. First off, I got to start with just saying thank you to everyone who's been joining the broadcast, participating in the comments. A lot of good stuff happening. A lot of great people been checking out some stuff, and everybody is doing some really cool things. Matter of fact, as this goes on, because I have no idea how long we'll do this, I don't know, hour, 45 minutes, something. If you've got some links to stuff you've been doing, share them in the comments and let everybody check stuff out. Check your studio out. Check out some recordings, whatever, man. Let's share and share alike. And you can see I've got coffee. Don't know what I do without my coffee. One of the hot topics, I'm just going to kick this off with something here, that has come up quite a bit lately is this everybody's home studio setups, whether it's using a mixer, the patch bay, how to get your pre's in, how do you wire something, what do you get, that sort of thing. I'm gonna do another live workshop coming up about part of that, but I want to let everyone know that if you have specific questions related, that it's very specific to your own setup, I do have really affordable lessons we can do online or here if you're in LA. There's a link in the description to where you can go to that. It's super affordable, man. That way I can really dive in on your specific needs. I can do a little research. I can find out what you need to do. Because, I know a lot. I've wired studios and done a lot of things, but everybody's setups are a little bit different. And, so, new gear coming out all the time, different setups. So if you need that specific help, please feel free. Follow that link. We can set up a lesson and get that done. Having said that, you got questions now? Bring them on. Let's talk about that stuff. One thing I do want to talk about is prep. We just did the mixing in the box thing, and the first part of that was prep, but there's also prep for recording sessions. I have found, since I've taken the time to always have some sort of pre-production meeting, whether it's a phone call, an email, or sometimes it's actually the band or artist coming here to the studio. Since I've started doing that, the sessions have been way more efficient, and we've been able to get where we need to sonically much faster because we had a plan going through. And that may be as simple as I'm asking the artist for references, especially if it's a new band I've never worked with. Like recently, just worked with the Blood Moon Howlers. Go check out that video. That was cool, behind the scenes with Scotty playing some drums. But we talked a couple times. Matt and I talked on the phone, and then Scott and I talked on the phone about the tones they were going for or what sonically they wanted. And then we got some references. So it's like, okay, you like that and you like this, and that's kind of our ballpark. And that gave me an opportunity to sit down, write out an input list. I have these every session I do. I have like a tracking sheet, an input list that I keep track of what mics, what outboard gear may get used, what channels it's going on, and all that good stuff. But it allows me to kind of write that up ahead of time so I can use the knowledge of what I have in my mic locker. I'm pointing over there because the mic locker is over there. And knowing those mics, I can kind of get pretty close to what we're going to need just initially. And then, of course, we set up, drummer starts playing, we get the track up, and then we change accordingly. But taking that time to actually think about what we're going to do before we even start the session has made everything so much more enjoyable, as opposed to getting in there and go, okay, what are we going to do? Because a lot of the times people are on the clock. We may not have an abundance of time, and then all of a sudden you're in there and you're trying to flounder around. You're trying to maybe figure out what a client's trying to tell you, because sometimes there's that. Sometimes people just don't quite understand how to articulate what they want in a sound, whether it's drums, guitar, vocals, whatever. And even I've had problems where sometimes they've given references that didn't fit the song because they weren't quite sure of the whole why I'm asking for references. So they maybe send me songs they like, but weren't necessarily didn't necessarily have anything to do with their particular song or mood or vibe. So taking that time beforehand alleviates some of that stress of the session because you at least have a starting point. And most of the time, I'm 85 or 90% in the ballpark right out of the gates. Sometimes it's a little less, but I figure if I'm always at least 75 to 85% there initially, figuring out the last part is actually pretty easy because you're tweaking then either to the client's ear who's hopefully sitting right with you, or the drummer or the guitar player, or you're listening to the tracks that you're recording to and you go, okay, wait a second, that sound doesn't quite work. Let me change this mic, or this mic needs to move, or hey, let's try a different guitar, or let's try a different snare, that sort of thing. Makes it more enjoyable, and it makes it a lot more stress-free. And I love sessions that are stress-free. I don't mind working and having deadline and keep moving. I don't mind that at all, but I like it when it's stress-free because then whoever's recording can relax and you can get the best out of them. At least that's the way I look at it. 1815, small mixing console 3-band EQ worth using during mixing. Here, let me get this iPad up here so I can actually read this a little better. Small 16-channel console, want to use it but not sure. What console do you have? Yeah, 3-band EQ, absolutely, man. You think of some of the 1073s, you got 3 bands of EQ. And that stuff worked rather well. I would say try anything, man. If it can make it better, try it. If you hook it up and it doesn't work, well then don't use it. But I would always give it a shot out of the gates. I used to have an old Allen and Heath console. Matter of fact, it was the first console that Ernesto and I put in our old studio. We'd upgraded from, man, I can't remember what we had, some Mackie Onyx things. This is a long time ago. And we got an Allen and Heath. Can't remember the model. It was 24 channels. Wasn't huge, small format, but the EQ on it was great. And I'm telling you, right out of the gates, it started making things better because we had a decent EQ to use. So my first thing, try it. Use it. Go for it. I want to make sure I say this right. Stygian? That's probably not going to be right. I'm sorry. I always feel like I over-mixed a song with too much EQ and compression the next day I listen to it. Any tips? Are you tracking? Are you printing your EQ and your compression? That's the first question. The second question is do it again and do it again. That's not a question. My answer to that is just keep doing it, really. Because I did that a lot in the beginning too. You're trying to figure out how far you can go and what sounds good. And a lot of the times in the beginning, I'd do the same thing. I'd overprint my EQ and I listen to it the next day and be like, oh, what the hell did I do? But then I'd be like, okay, what is it I did too much of? Maybe I added way too much click, or maybe I added way too much bottom. Adding way too much bottom isn't necessarily a bad thing because that you can take away. It's easier to take that away than add. But the compression, here's what I would do. I would do it in stages. Well, first off, I would have an experimental night. If it's drums, if it's guitar, if it's vocals, whatever, have a friend come over, knowing that it's maybe going to be a couple hours, and all you're going to do is you're going to try different levels of compression or EQ while tracking. Because it is very different, especially pushing into a compressor is very different when you're doing it and you're pushing air into a mic and it's going into the compressor than when it's after the fact already in your DAW and doing it. Not necessarily right or wrong, but it is two very different things. The compression, I would start out light. Try doing like containment compression, only a couple dB, and see how that reacts. Especially if it's on, especially if it's on a vocal. But vocals can get really, harsh in the sibilants with too much of that. But it could be anything. It could be a snare drum. It could be a kick drum. That sort of thing. But try it just a little bit at first and then gradually do more. And then consider your source. For instance, snare drum. Probably not going to want to print a compressor that is just freaking slammed during the tracking stage. Most likely, if you're doing containment, it'll be pretty fast attack, fast release because you're just trying to get the peaks. But you're not looking for that meter on the compressor to go crazy. You're maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 dB, 5 on a super loud something, but fast attack, fast release. You're just trying to contain the peaks a little bit. And do it until you hear it. And then when you hear it and you go, okay, wait, there's some compression artifacts, depending on the compressor you're using. Back it off just a little bit so you don't really hear it. It's going to take some practice. My advice is practice that stuff, invite some friends over to do it, get together, everybody will learn something, and don't be afraid to mess something up. EQ is, I've been there where you're at, where I've listened the next day and gone, why did I EQ that way going in? And now I'm stuck with it. And I'm glad I did that stuff early on, because I learned what I didn't like. So the thing I would do is I would always analyze what I did and what I didn't like, what went wrong, so I could remember that. I'd maybe make a note or two, or maybe go right back and do it again that night and figure out, okay, wait, this thing I say it was a kick drum, and man, I had all this 5K and it's just too, now I don't need that much click. Maybe I move the microphone in and get it, and then it's a dB or two in. So you got to make notes of what you don't like the next day about it. What is making you pull your hair out, or face plant? And then you can take those notes to your next session. But we did a lot of, the thing I can't stress enough is practice sessions. We did that so much in the beginning. And matter of fact, we're going to start doing some of that more, and we're going to broadcast this stuff. But I did it so much early on in my engineering career, and that allowed me to make a lot of those mistakes and try things out and figure out what worked, what didn't work. And it's just as important to figure out what doesn't work as it is to figure out what does work. Make notes, go back and try it again. Long-winded answer, man. I hope that kind of got there. Moving on. Justin, can you comment on your Yamaha monitor? So many people say get NS10s with Bryson amp used, but you're looking over $1,000 for... Yeah, I know. Monitors are really personal. Let's see if you guys can move out of the way here. I actually have 3 sets here. There's only 2 up right now, and it's because I don't have enough room to keep all 3 going at the same time. These small ones, the HS550s or HM50s are my absolute favorites. I've worked on those for 8 years now, and I do most of my mixing and stuff on those. We do have a Yamaha sub hooked up to them. It's not really loud, though. The funny thing with the sub is I actually had one for a while, didn't like it, couldn't get anything done with it. And about 6 months ago, Ernesto and I were talking about it. So we picked one up, and we came in here and spent some time really trying to get it set right for the room. We did a lot of referencing with tracks we knew that had great low end and whatnot, and actually got a setting, and it works. It's a great combo right now. I love the 5s. I am not an NS10 fan. I am one of those guys that every time I work on NS10s, my stuff comes out all jacked up. My ears just don't know what to do. And I know I could work on them more. Anything you work on long enough, you get to learn it. But it just never... they never really did it for me. And I also want to enjoy what I'm working on, and that just didn't make it enjoyable. So I never went the NS10 route. I love these 5s. I like the 8s too. I usually do most of my work on the 5s, and I check on the 8s. And I have a pair of Tridents that are just actually right behind this computer that sometimes I swap up too, because they have an entirely different low mid than the Yamahas. And as soon as I redo my shelf, I'll be able to get everything back up on there behind the console. But I really don't think you need to go out and spend... Man, I got to think how to say this, because there's more than one way to look at this. Obviously, I don't think you need to go out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars on monitoring. Do I wish I could? There's probably some out there, some super high-end stuff that I would really love to have, and maybe it'll change my life. I don't know. But these small Yamahas are a couple $100 each. The sub's a few $100s. I've gotten used to them. They're pretty easy to work with, especially in your mid-range and stuff, where things can get really crowded in a lot of modern mixes and whatnot. They do a really good job with that. I know Focal has some new speakers. Actually, there's a set of Focals, man, and I keep telling people about them, cannot remember the model. I saw them at AES a couple years ago. I'm going to have to look this up and get back to you guys, but there's a set of Focals. I think they were 6.5s that I heard. We walked into the booth, and my jaw dropped, and they were, I want to say, $350, $399 each, and they were flat out amazing. So there are some really good monitors out there that are not in the thousands of dollars range. If you've got the budget, go for it. But if you're not, Don't think you have to go spin that to make something good. Hell, I worked on KRKs, some old Rocket 8s for a long time that were great. I'm not a huge fan of the new ones, but those old Rocket 8s were great. The thing I would say is when you go monitor mixing, you got to go, or monitor shopping, you've got to go somewhere you can test some out so you can hear them. Take some music that you're really familiar with, whether it's your own or something else. If you go into a Guitar Center, make sure they're not running it through sonic maximizers. I know the ones here, every time we've gone in, it's been a while, but I would have to get the sales guy to leave so I could go behind, unplug it out of sonic maximizers, and just plug in the speakers we wanted to hear direct, because they're trying to make everything sound good. So just go somewhere you know that you can get a direct sound. Take some music you know well. One I take AC/DC Back in Black. I know that album so well, the bottom, the mid, the top, that I can put that on and pretty much know exactly what I'm getting in a system and where I like it or where I don't like it. So just have a good reference and take with you. I love these Yamahas, though, just for the record. Obviously, I have 2 sets of them, but the 5s, I totally dig them, especially with the sub dialed in correctly. Or correctly, for this room, anyway. What's next? Well, it's a little Behringer SX24. Here, let me take a look while we're here. Un momento. What is it? SX22442 FX. I think I know. Oh, yeah, a little Eurodesk. Try it. I mean, my first instinct initially is going to be that it's probably not the best EQ of everything, but I think it's worth a shot. I think it'd totally be worth a night of you hooking that up and recording some stuff through it and seeing if it does help. Because you may actually get, maybe there's a part of the bottom end of the EQ is nice, or maybe, the mid-range or something helps out. There is something cool even with having just knobs on an EQ that is just very immediate. I find it to be much faster than dealing with the plug-in, but you're not really going to know until you try it. Try it out, see if you like it. If you don't, I would say if you don't like it, it'd be better to wait and do it all after the fact than try to force using a piece of gear just because it's analog and it's right there if it doesn't sound good, if that makes sense. But I think it's worth a shot, man. We did it, you know what? Let me find this. We did an old, back in the full-on drums days, which Scott and I should do some stuff. We did a shootout. Let's see if I can find this link. Not really a shootout, but we had an old Behringer mixer, we had an API, and we had something else. Full on drums. Let me see if I can find this episode and post a link here. This might be kind of interesting. Ooh, is this it? Oh, yes. Okay, here's a link. Let me get a link to this. I have not watched this in a long time, you guys, but what we used, we had some Golden Age projects, we had a Millennia HV3D, an API 212, and a Behringer Eurodesk that we used. Okay, let me see the old chat. I'm going to post this right now. Now save that link. Don't go away, though. Or open in another tab. But check that out. It was kind of interesting. And yes, I still had a mohawk at the time. Stitch, okay, you say... Okay, so you're only using the plug... Okay, since you're only doing plugins, man, that gives you the chance to go back and tweak it. You know what I would do is... I would copy... Let's say you have an EQ inserted in whatever DAW you're using. Before you go trying to change it, leave that EQ and just open a new one and just bypass the first one. Then use that second EQ. So if that way, if you get it better and you go, oh, hey, I like that sound better, you can go back and compare it to your original EQ so you can see visually what you liked and what you didn't, or what worked and what didn't work. That might actually help you actually kind of retain some of that as you're doing it and get faster, because it gives you a way to kind of see what's going on. Julian, what's happening, dude? How do you think the active deep listening helps you become a better mixer? What kind of listening do you do when you find a mix you love? That's a great question. When I find a mix I love, I'll bet I can listen to it over and over and hear something new. Like, I listen to a lot of Michael Brower mixes because I think that guy's just the bomb. Fantastic. Same Joe Barresi, another favorite one of mine, and two very different types. But I can listen to those mixes over and over and hear something new. And usually at first for me, I'm trying to just listen to everything as a whole, you know, and I try to listen emotionally, if that makes sense, on what it makes me, how it makes me feel. Like, why is it good? Because most of the time, if I really dig a mix, it's not just because it sounds great. It's somehow it moves me. And maybe that's partially songwriting and arrangement, and then the mixer just adds his mojo on the top of that. But usually there's some sort of emotional connection I have to it. And then I kind of try to figure out what that is, and then I start trying to dissect it, like listening to how the low end reacts, or listening to how they created depth, or how they created width, that sort of thing. And listening sometimes to how many things are going on at the same time, and if they're busy, how the hell did they get all the different elements to fit? Like, you listen to some old Eagles stuff, there are so many things going on in those mixes, but they never feel busy. It's insane. So, but for me, it starts with some sort of emotion, you know, it grabs me, and then I try to figure out what that is, and then I try to remember that when I go to mix to see if it's something that I can apply to my own mixes. But I really try, and I'm not always successful at this, but I really try to stay away from just going into super analytical mode right away, unless I'm in the middle of mixing already and say I have a reference, or I'm trying to figure something out in my mix that isn't working and I'm searching for a reference that will help me. Then instantly I'm very, very specific. So for instance, say it's like a heavy rock thing that's got giant bass, but there's also a lot of kick drum going on, and I'm just having a hard time getting the two to work together. I may search for some things specifically that have that going, and right away I'm in analytical mode. But if I'm just listening, and the deep listening, I'm going for how it makes me feel first. And I like to close my eyes a lot of the times. This, maybe I'm showing my age here, but I used to do this, you know, when I was younger too. And I'd sit back and put some headphones on and just turn the lights down so there's nothing, and just get kind of lost in it. And then when I find great stuff that way, then I'll start going back headphone speakers to see how different things are. But I love to just kind of get lost in it first. It's fun that way, because then sometimes you discover things and you hear things differently when you're not trying to analyze right away, which is hard to do now, because we're all analyzing all the freaking time. Everywhere, everybody's analyzing this, analyzing that. I could do this, I could do this. So it's hard to let that go sometimes and just really listen. But it's worth it if you can get there. You bet, Stigent. I hope I'm saying your name right, man. But you bet, Justin. Yeah, you bet, man. Check the Yamaha. Check anything out. Find some monitors that agree with your ears, man. You have to do that. Everybody's different. The JBLs, they have controlled mids. Yeah, I know some friends that swear by the JBLs. They're a little hi-fi for me, but I could actually work with them. I love their live speakers, man. They always sound really alive. I didn't mean for that. Kind of backed myself in a corner with that one. Okay, what's the next one? Can you recommend a good, modestly priced kit, snare, and cymbals for recording? Bonus, I have a small room, low ceilings, always get more hi-hat bleed than I like. Okay, so you guys, Justin's asking about a modestly priced kit, snare, and cymbals for recording. There's a lot of good modestly priced kits, honestly. On the upper end of that, the Gretsch Renowned stuff, like I have here, awesome, can't go wrong with it. But there's some mid-priced Pearl stuff, the Session Series. I'm a maple guy. I love maple. I love mahogany too, but I'm really a maple dude. And the midline Pearl stuff, fantastic. I have an old Session kit that sounds, every time we pull it out, I wonder why we don't use it more. They're not expensive kits. You know, I'd say that 1,000 to just under 1,000. I'd say the Renown's probably just going to be a touch over that. But I also have a Forum kit that we haven't used in a while that I bought for $200 on Craigslist that sounds, the kick drum's one of the best I've ever used. But I'd say you can't go wrong with some of the Pearl stuff in the mid-range. The Gretsch stuff in the mid-range is also really nice, depending on what you want. If you were looking for birch, there's a really nice Pearl birch also. Oddly enough, the PDP birch is really nice too. I'm not a huge DW fan at all, but the PDP stuff actually sounds really good. Every time someone brings one in, I'm like, holy crap, man, this is like $800. It sounds amazing. So I'd recommend that. And Tama has a couple nice birch. I think they do really well in the birch too and have some good mid-price kits. Snares, man, that's a tough one. It depends on what sound you're going for, really. You want something fat, you need something that's crack, if you're going for an overall kind of thing, it's hard to go wrong. I know this isn't technically mid-range, but it's hard to go wrong with the Black Beauty. It's really, they just kind of work all the time. I also have a Ludwig Black Magic, which is their kind of knockoff of the Black Beauty, but I can tell you I have a 5 in both, a real Black Beauty and the Black Magic. They aren't even, not even the same. And that Black Magic is fantastic. And it was $300, $350, not overly expensive. I also have a kind of a mid-priced Yamaha steel snare that sounds great too. A little drier though. But you're looking for something, if you're going something, you're going to only have one, you need something versatile, and the snare is where I might look at spending an extra $1 or $2. And that's why I say the Black Beauties, man, it's really hard to go wrong with that. And the new ones sound great. Or even check out some of the Black Magic. You might have to check out a few of them, but you'll find one that's good. Cymbals are tricky. I'm a Peisty guy, as you know. I know they're not the cheapest, but it's hard to go wrong with the 602s, not the Formula 602s, and they're actually not that expensive. There were some Sabians. Man, I was just over talking to Chris Stanky at Sabian recently, and he'd show me stuff, and I can't remember the model off the top of my head. You know what? I'm going to make a note of that. That's a great list to get out on some things. So I'm going to make a note of that and maybe get start putting a little list together we can all share and some around. Low ceilings. Now, this is a great question, guys, so I'm going to take a second to answer this because I'm assuming a lot of you may have a similar issue with your room wall and ceiling proximity in your home studios. And low ceilings, especially if you're in a house or something, could be a huge issue. The thing you want to try to do with that is you want to make your ceiling disappear. If you have 7-foot ceilings, 8-foot ceilings, if you can reach up and touch them or almost reach up and touch the ceiling, they're too damn close. It's going to start wreaking havoc on pretty much your whole kit. Hi-hats are just going to be splashing off that, coming back down into your overheads, into your other microphones. Your stereo image is going to get smeared. You want to try to make the ceiling disappear as much as you can. Get some foam up there. Get anything you can do to kill that reflection. Killing basic reflection isn't hard. You can do it with 1 inch of foam and you can just take that away. But what I would maybe try to recommend is getting some at least 2-inch foam or 2-inch panels. There's some companies that make really well-priced panels. I know there's a couple here in LA that have good prices. I want to say one is called LA Sound. Man, let me look that up before I say the wrong thing. But there are some LA Sound. If I could spell right. Let me find this company. You can get some pretty, LA Sound Panels, lasoundpanels.com. And there's another one here too. I can't remember it off the top of my head that makes some pretty affordable panels. But try this. First, use whatever you have, even heavy blankets, anything you can get up there, as dense as you can, and just make your ceiling disappear. You're not trying to redirect it with diffusion or anything like that. Soak it up, kill the reflection coming back down. If you can get some, say, 2-inch thick panels and hang them 2 inches away from the wall, that will make them even more efficient and lower the frequencies that they're going to affect. You could even get into maybe even some of your mid-range that way, which can help clean up a lot of things with your overheads. But first, make it disappear as best you can. If you can't do any of that right away, I actually have had success with, like, foam that ships with things sometimes. If it's dense enough, I've cut holes in that and put my pencil mics through there. So the microphone, let me see if I have a mic in here. Oh, I don't have one close. But basically, I have a piece of foam. I cut a hole and I put the mic through it, just so the mic is looking down at the drum set. But the foam in the reflection coming back down from the ceiling is hitting the foam first before hitting the capsule of the mic again. And that actually can work pretty well. Not the same as doing the whole ceiling, but as much of the ceiling above the kit you can make it disappear. Just get something up there to start, and then maybe look into some panels or look into some you can make your own. You could get some, even some Orlex foam or something. Here, let me post this link to LA Sound Panels. Where's my tab? They've got some great stuff. There's another one too. I'm spacing it off the top of my head. I'll try to remember though. All right, moving on. You're welcome, 1815. Superstar. Yeah, the Tama Superstars can be great. Man, if you get a kit that's in good shape and get some heads on it and just know how to tune it, you can do a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of great Zildjian cymbals. The only thing that with that, and I know that I started that comment like a negative, and it kind of is, but it's also kind of a positive, is with the Zildjians, when you really have to go try different ones out because no two cymbals are the same. It's one thing I like about the Pisces. If I find something I love, I know I can pretty much get that same cymbal again. However, you find some Zildjians that you really love, you got special cymbals because no one else is going to have exactly the same thing, and that's kind of cool too. Okay, Trident 1815, you have a question. How did you know you wanted the Trident 88 console? When a mixing studio is my career, I have no idea what console to plan on getting. Okay, that's a great question. The console, I always knew I liked mixing analog, and even before I had a console, I had outboard gear that I would use with my mixes, with my I/O plugins, so I could, basically use all my rack gear as plugins. The console came about after we built this studio. Originally, we didn't have one. Everything was outboard gear. And I knew that just from a business standpoint, I needed to get a console in. I knew I always wanted one anyway, but I didn't know what to kind of get at first. And I started working with the guys down at PMI a little bit, doing some stuff. I knew some people down there. And we talked about doing some things, so we pulled a Toft in here initially. Had a 24-channel Toft console, and I did a ton of work on that. We mixed on that, tracked on that. I loved it. And I knew enough about the Toft because I'd worked on Tridents before at others, like Sound Image over here, not like 10 minutes from me. It's right next to, it's in the Sound City complex. They had an ADB in their middle studio, and I had done a lot of tracking there and always loved how things sounded. So I knew I liked that. So when the ADB thing, the ATB, the Toft came up, I'm like, okay, at least I know the category I wanted because I know what they were trying to achieve with that. And for the most part, did a fantastic job, especially for the price point. And then I just kept that relationship with Justin and those guys down there, who I love. Man, they are fantastic people. They have so much cool stuff coming up, you guys. They've got some neat things coming up in the next year. To stay tuned. But he had called me, and they had started rebuilding the Trident brand. They had some of the guys from Trident Studios in London working on. Taz Bogle was doing it. Justin Hyatt and Alan Hyatt was heavily involved with that. And these are all like, these dudes know audio, man. And Justin had called me and said, hey, I want to put this Trident in here. And so this right here actually is the prototype of the 88. So like I said, I already knew I loved the ADB sound because I had worked on it a bunch. So I knew I liked it. The cool thing about this is it has the ADC EQ, so the top band and the bottom band are sweepable instead of fixed frequency, which is really cool. And I just always loved the sound of that, and I love mixing. I love tracking and mixing on this thing, man, whether I'm just stimming on it or whatever. A lot of that just came from the opportunity to work with them, and then knowing just from all the sessions and stuff I'd done, just actually as a musician and getting to work on different things, how much I liked the sound of that console. So when all that came up, I'm like, hey, I'm in this with the 80 ATB. I was like, wow, I'm in that Trident vibe now. I'm in that ADB vibe that I know I like. And then I got to do this. So this is, I wouldn't call this an ADB at all. This is definitely a bigger sounding console than that. It's a little more open on the bottom and then a little more open on the top. But it's definitely in that family. So I jumped on the chance to work with those guys and help them do the beta testing on this. And they're fantastic. I hope that answered your question. You know, I would try to go work at some different studios or ask different people. It's hard to ask people about sound because it's really subjective, and it's hard for, as you can tell, it's hard to kind of articulate sound via just talking to somebody, or it's even harder typing it in comments. But I just knew from experience from working on Neves and SSLs and Trident stuff that I loved the sound of this, and I knew this would allow me to be kind of versatile. I know a lot of people call ADBs like the rock console. I know the A range, definitely, man, that a lot of great rock records made on that. But a lot of people say that the ADBs are great for rock. And they are, but I think that's really cutting them short. I've done jazz on this. We've done string sections in here on this. I've mixed some like almost jazz type vocal records on this, and this is a really versatile board. So I guess it came from experience a little bit. If you have a Vintage King, or if you have a place like that where you can go set up appointments to go in and maybe run some of your music through and get a kind of a feel for it, I would highly recommend doing that. If you're in the area where there's a Trident and you're in LA, get a hold of Justin and those guys. We've been more than happy to set up a demo. I'm one of the demo studios for Trident. So just get a hold of those guys. We'll set up a time to come in and you can actually get your hands on it. We do that all the time. Hope that answers the question. I hope that helps a little bit anyway. PC Baxter, first ribbon is on the way. I see some of the people put the ribbon right on the amp grill or close to a kick. Will the air coming out of the speaker or kick damage the ribbon? And yes, it can. The thing with outside the kick, and I have blown up a ribbon or two trying this, is it's obviously if you get it right up on there, yeah, it's going to be pushing so much air. A couple things you could try. One, try starting back further and see if you can get what you're looking for further away, and just gradually move it up. The other two things, one, I would angle the mic. So you don't want the sound wave, if you're hitting that ribbon directly on, you're doing this, you're just going to stretch that ribbon. But if you can angle it, still if you put it up too close, you could damage it, but it's going to hit, and instead of just hitting the ribbon like this, it actually kind of disperses the energy down. You could also try on a guitar, putting a pop filter in front of it. Now, if you are pushing tons and tons of pressure, there is a chance that you could damage your ribbon mic. But I use ribbons close to a kick drum all the time. I don't use it. If this is my kick, I'm usually not up where I'd maybe put a condenser or a sub kick. It's usually going to be back maybe 6-8 inches, or sometimes it's actually 16 to 18 inches back and lower, because the figure 8 pattern is inherently tighter on a ribbon mic than even most cardioids. So you can get it further away, and the null side of the figure 8 is going to block out your rooms on the sides. Of course, you're going to get some in the back end of the microphone, but it allows you, even if I'm a foot away or 16 inches away, subtle movements in where I'm aiming the mic can actually still make pretty big difference. But maybe start 6 to 8 inches back and don't go any closer. Try angling it just a little bit, but also try it further back in conjunction with something that's tighter. I also like it. Actually, you know what? Let me find another link. I got another one. Got another link to share you that I did with a couple ribbons. Let me get back to the channel. But I commonly will put, I get ribbons right up on amps quite a bit, actually. But if you're super, super duper high gain, or, you've got some old Fender amps that you're having to drive the input on 7 or 8, and you walk in the room and, man, it's, those, got one of my friends, I want to say it's a Super Reverb or something out here. I can't remember the exact one. It's a fantastic sounding amp, but when you drive it up around 7 and 8, and it makes my Marshall seem quiet. So then you kind of have to use your ears a little bit. a lot of the time on a guitar, newer ribbons are a lot tougher. If you had some old vintage Coles or something like that, I'd say be gentle. Start further away. Don't be very careful. But newer ribbons are a little bit tougher. But still, you know, if you put it up on a guitar and you hear right away that it's like kind of overloading the mic, get out there and move it. But let me find this. I've got a great link that I did with just 2 mics, and they're both ribbons on a kit. Let's see if I can find that link for you. Oh, wrong playlist. Let me see. Oh, that's... Man, a lot of videos in this playlist here. Oh, I think I found it. Let me see if this is it. Ooh. Yep. All right, now this I shot quite a while ago. This is really short, but it's just 2 mics and a ribbon is on the kick. So let me post this link. Check that sucker out. And there's a couple more than just that one, but that one I know specifically. I had that on there, so... Regal Beagle, you bought the 144. Dude, I love the 144, man. I use it all the freaking time, especially on guitars. And you say, per this channel for guitar, and I had no problem 2 fingers out from the grill cloth. Yeah. Matter of fact, that's one of my favorite things to use the MXL on, is that 144 is guitars. I like it on drums too, but there's just something about that mic on guitars that's freaking awesome. $100 for a ribbon mic. Regal Beagle, nice choice. Thank you for sharing that. Can you record drums in a non-soundproof room? What do you mean by non-soundproof? Do you mean soundproof or a treated room? Because they're different things. Soundproof room would mean that we're dealing with noises coming in and out of the structure. Are you talking about a room that is not treated at all inside there? And to both of those answers, I say, yeah, it's totally possible. I mean, obviously, size of the room, all those things that are a factor, you're probably, if you want just an open sound, you could. I mean, without knowing the dimensions in too much of your room, it'd be hard to kind of tell there to really get a sense of it. But I have recorded in some rooms. Matter of fact, there's another full-on drums video we did way back where we went to some place over in Glendale. It's just a giant... It's actually meant for people to rent out for doing video stuff. There was no treatment whatsoever. And Orlex had sent us a bunch of these panels that we use every once in a while. So we went over there with the drum set and 8 of these panels and tried to see if we could record in a completely untreated, non-recording room. And actually, with a little bit of control from the panels and whatnot, we were able to dial in a pretty good sound. But it's going to depend on the size of the room, how sloppy it is, and what sound you want. If you want tight and punchy, an untreated, room that has a lot of reflection and whatnot, maybe a little tricky to get a sound in. Yeah, furniture can help a lot with reflections, honestly. I mean, I wouldn't call them diffusers. I know people like to say that. But most of the time our furniture, there's not enough density for it to actually to soak up anything. It's like I've got 2 couches in here, and neither one of them have the materials aren't dense enough to do much in any low end area, but they are going to kill reflections abso-freaking-lutely, and probably soak up some high and even some high mids maybe. So it all helps. All that stuff can help, especially just if you're just trying to control reflection, couch on the opposite end of the room can help quite a bit. Regal Beagle Studios, my thoughts on having 2 size monitors. 2 different size monitors, I'm sorry. Actually, I think it's kind of important, especially if you only have a couple sets of monitors, to have them be different. The thing I like about the mid-range is different in these 2 speakers, so it allows me to hear something a little bit different. I know when it sits in the 5s, if it's a little on front, we're good. If it's in the 8s, if it's a touch back, I know it's good. But the the low end and the low mids are also a little different on the 8s, which is why I do most of my work on the 5s. When I switch to the 8s, I'm kind of paying attention to my low mids and how that interacts with my mid range, and it gives me a chance. And then I go a step down and I take the line actually right here. You can see the cable. I run it into my laptop, and I have Logic running on a laptop with the line input selected, so I just run in there and then I can check on that to see how things are going. But I'd say you want these speakers for me, and you know what, a year from now this could change, but for now they're relatively similar in how smooth the top end is. Although I would say the 8s are maybe brighter, but the 5s have more mid-range. But they're different enough in key areas that allow me to hear what's going to happen if it goes to a different type of system. And I think it's important that your speakers aren't too the same, and just the fact that they're different size speakers in there is going to make that difference. Actually, the tweeters are a little bit different too, and the 8s are definitely brighter. But I think it's important to know, because I'm trying to think how to word this, but basically having them two different sizes, two different speakers that sound a little bit different. When I go back and forth, once I've learned how they react, that way I know if I go out to the car, if I go to my friend's house, or if I go checking it on the laptop or something, just to see how, unfortunately people consume our music that way, that it's going to translate, and it allows me to be more accurate without having to go check in so many different places. Now, I still do. I check all the time because, I want to make sure it's going to translate. But I do think it's important to have a couple different sizes. Like, I see some people that might have the same size speakers, but maybe one set's like a barefoot or something that has 2 in there with the sub, and then there's one that's just a single with the tweeter next to it, that are very different. So I think it's important to at least have something different. If I was going to buy 2 sets of monitors, I wouldn't buy the same size. I'll put it that way. Maybe that was a long-winded answer. Stitch, feeling unique with your Zildjians? Absolutely, man. Rock. My buddy Tim Pedersen was in here recording recently, and he has some Zildjians back from the 80s, and man, they were killing. They sounded fantastic. Now I want to go get a set of them. Gethin, I use the Yamahas as well. Great. Do need a sub to hear the low end. Yeah, the 8s for more around tone. Yeah, if you were only going to have, the thing is, if I was recommending something, and take this with a grain of salt, and you're only going to get one, I would say go with the 8s so you have some more bottom end. However, before I had 8s and before I had a sub, I had those 5s. And that's what I did most of my work on. And I go listen to some of those early mixes. I still love them. And I didn't have a sub or anything to work with at that point. Although now that I do have the sub dialed in right, I like it way better. So it could help. How important is the room when recording drums, and how do you remedy a bad room? That is a huge, the producers one, that is a huge question. And I think for drums, the room is immensely important because of all the instruments, it's probably the one most affected by the room. And a room sound can change a drum sound so drastically. Maybe that would actually be a cool broadcast to figure out how to do that. Might have to do that as an on-demand video where we'll go get a room somewhere that's really wide open, and we'll just do a couple different things with it. But it's really important, I think. That doesn't mean you have to have Ocean Way or something like that, but I think knowing how your room reacts and knowing what the room is really important, or knowing how to manipulate your room. Like here at Ultimate Studios, Inc., I put all the panels are on rails back in the live room, so I can move all my diffusers, all my absorbers, any of that stuff around to manipulate the room depending on what we need to record. And while that doesn't happen a ton, we do every time I've had to do it. I'm so glad I can, because I can tweak the room to sound different. So it is important, but that's a huge question. What was the second half? Remedy a bad room. Man, I'd love to give you an easy answer, but we'd have to define what bad is and what the problems are, and then go about changing it. Is it just that it's too bouncy and reflecty? That's a lot easier. Thin, even 1-inch panels in the right places can kill some reflection. If you've got low end issues or low mid issues, that becomes a different thing. If it's a smaller room, chances are you have more low end issues. If it's a bigger room, chances are it's going to be your low mids, and your lower mid range is going to be something you might have to deal with. So it all kinds of depends on bad. But having said that, there's a couple people I'm talking to that do acoustics for a living that I really like, that I'm trying to get in and talk about those things. So I'm working on something that may answer some more of that question. Is it possible? I'll leave you with this. Is it possible to deal with a bad room? Yes. How much we can deal with it's going to depend on factors of size and what we're trying to fix. I know that probably isn't the direct answer or the answer you were looking for on that, but that's a big one to answer. Your mic should be approximately 10 dB louder. You can find some nice tutorial on the web how to achieve it. Pablo, what are you talking about? You talking about here in the studio? And I can boost it. All you gotta do is tell me you can't hear me. It helps. Okay. 6 to 9 months. Hopefully get a hold of Justin. Yeah, 1815, man. Just get a hold of him. Cool. Thanks for joining us, dude. Do you also angle the ribbon mic on the amp or need to? I would say, PC Baxter, on a ribbon on an amp, I would say I probably do a lot. I don't know if I always need to. A lot of it depends on the gain. If the amp is really loud, I'll probably start that way. Just because I just want to protect the mic any way I can. If it's something that isn't cranked or you're not driving a bunch of gain, I probably won't worry about it too much. It depends on the volume. And you'll know if it's cranking loud, because you'll get in there and your ears will be like, whoa, this thing is loud, Room size video would be incredibly useful. Yeah, it's just, doing that acoustic stuff is hard because there's so many variables in everybody's rooms and situations. So we're just trying to figure out a way that we can kind of put some information together that's detailed enough to help, but general enough to cover, a lot of different people's problems. So you know what? I'll tell you what, you guys, drop me a line. I can start collecting some info so we can figure out how to do this. Drop me a line on either here on YouTube I think there's a discussion or a messages panel on the front page, or go to ultimatestudiosinc.com, go to the contact page, and send me a message just on some of the issues you're having with your rooms, or what size it is and what you're hearing. And then I can put some of that together, so when I talk to my buddies that I'm trying to get to come on the show, I've got some information to arm them with so we can try to figure out how to do it. Because I really do want to do something like that. I've been trying this for a while, man. Totally. The Mohawk, yeah. Man, that thing took a long time to put up. I'm kind of glad I don't have it now. Wouldn't fit in the car either. So, all right, see if I've missed anybody. Does having one external EQ and compressor change a lot to your mixes, or should I focus on spending my wee money on better preamps and microphones? Stan, thank you for telling me how to say that right. I'm sorry, man. I would say, listen, I love EQ and I love compressors a lot. As you can see, well, you can't really see, but I got a rack full of compressors behind me. I would say first, if you're spending your money on gear, good mic. And then preamp. Making sure you're getting something that isn't hurting your sound. Because there's a lot of decent price preamps and even microphones out there now that sound really good, that you don't have to go mortgage any, your arm to buy. And I would say start there before a compressor and EQ. Because everything starts at the source anyway. If you have a good source, you could get by with little to no EQ or compression. So get a good mic first and make sure your source, and then move there. Then the preamp, maybe even your converter, that sort of thing. I know that's a big topic too, because some people say you got to have everything high end, and some people say, oh, you can make it without it. It's a myth. Just go do it. And both are right. I do think that having a better quality mic better quality mic, better quality conversion makes things better and easier to capture a good voice. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go spend $5,000 on a microphone at all. The 2 mics I've been using on vocals here recently, well, the 3, SM7B, Roswell Pro Audio Delphos AT4047. You know, and the Roswell and the AT are about $800, and the SM7Bs $300 or something like that. Not even that expensive. Oh, did one recently with an SM57 because it was the right mic. Talk about cheap microphones, you know, and it worked. So, but I would say if you're going to spend the money first, microphone, and then get it right at the source, and then move on to the next thing, which would be making sure you get a preamp that's helping you out, and then EQ and compression. That would be last. Although a lot of the times I know it's the most fun, but I would do that after microphone. My opinion. My bad room, I meant mostly pretty unpleasant high and reflection. No, producer, don't worry, man. That's a big question. That's a great question you asked, man. It really is. So you're saying that your bad room is mostly unpleasant high-end reflections. Hi-hat and ride cymbals. Yeah. So that is a little easier to deal with. Depending on your dimensions, you know, some 2-inch panels. You could even do it with one, but if you could get some 2-inch panels that are pretty dense, either made of some, you know, rigid fiberglass or even some really dense foam if you're on a budget, or if you're handy, make some. They're not hard to make. They just take a little time and a few tools. But if strategically, depending on ceiling, say your ceiling's a little low, I'd do that first. First and foremost, get your ceiling, and if it's lower, make it disappear with some absorption. 2-inch panels hung a couple inches off the wall, or if you're out of room or you don't have the ability to do that, put them right on it for now, just to do that. Maybe some left to right on your walls if it's a narrower room. You know, maybe you alternate where they are left to right. You know, you have one here, the right side stays here, and then you go 2 feet forward and you put one on the left side. Then you go 2 feet forward and put one on the right side. That way, just so your side reflections, it starts to take some of that out. But whatever wall, and wall includes floor and ceiling, whatever wall is closest to you, get rid of that one first. Because I know a lot of that high-end stuff is just sloppy stuff coming back off a wall left to right, or your top or bottom. You know, so get rid of that. Take care of that first. Regal Beagle, what's my current hardware or plugins I use on the Tubus? That's a fantastic question. And matter of fact, I'm going to share one more link real quick because it just went up yesterday. The next one's going to go up today as soon as I get done with this broadcast. Let me find it here. Tubus. I'm going to say that I am, unless I'm doing like recording a full concert and we have to run it off. Well, nah, I'm going to probably do it then too. I almost always, let's see if you can, let me share this link first. Because yesterday, part 2 of the Mixing in the Box series went up. And as you guys know, I like to stay out on the console, but sometimes you just got to do it in the box for whatever reason. And part 2 of Mixing in the Box, I actually cut Wednesday's broadcast up into 2 parts because it was so long. Or 3 parts. So this part 2, which is the first part from Wednesday, starts with the master bus because I almost always have something on my master bus to start. So let me see if you guys can see this. Let me move this down here. You see this guy right here? This is the Allen Smart Research C1, and it's basically an SSL. It's awesome. This is on most of, if not all of my mixes. It's this Smart Research C1 going into my Tonelux EQ5P EQ. And it just works. I will change sometimes and use the Tonelux EQ or TX5C compressor on the master bus, but a lot of the times that's over with my drums because it sounds so killer. Or depending on my vocal, it will be on my vocal because it's killer. But most of the time, it's Smart Research C1, Tonelux EQ5P EQ. And I'm also, you got to remember, if I'm doing my mixing, I'm grouping a lot of stuff. Say my drums and bass are going to a group that's going to have some sort of compression there. My guitars are going to a group, same thing there. If there's keyboards or organs or something else, maybe it's also in a group that's getting a little something. So I'm doing it in stages. I rarely go past 4 dB of reduction on the C1. And sometimes it's not even that. The setting actually hardly ever changes. It's right now it's 4-1. The attack's at 10 and the release is at auto. And sometimes my attack will go to 30 instead of 10, depending on how aggressive the music is or how aggressive we want the master to be. But I'm usually doing it in stages. Now, in the box, if you follow that link I just put up, you'll see I talk about that right away of what I did. And I just used a Logic stock plugin on that, and it actually worked pretty well. When I put out the next two parts, part 3 and 4 on that, you'll see that master bus starts to get hit a little bit harder. But I almost always start with those on, and that's the first thing I do. Because if it's tracked well, a lot of the times I get that, and I get the compressor in my EQ, and my mix already starts to sound like a mix. I'm going to do a lot less over here on the other stuff. But I'll constantly go in and out with it and check just to make sure it's actually doing what I want it to do. Did that answer your question, I hope? Vocals with dude, so 1815, so many vocals throughout time people have used 57s, man, with the vocal. It's crazy. Sometimes it works. I do find vocals to be the most picky with microphones, because a voice you hear instantly right away if it works with the mic or doesn't, and you can make drastic differences by changing a microphone more than any other instrument, in my opinion. And sometimes it's about vibe. Sometimes your nice condenser mic is the wrong mic for the song, no matter how good the vocalist sounds through it. You know, sometimes it's an SM57 going through a guitar amp that you're miking is the right sound for your vocal. It all depends on the music first. But yeah, try it out, man. I use Heil PR30 a lot too. Do that a lot. SM7B, I like SM7Bs, man. When they work, it's a fantastic mic. I mean, it's the Michael Jackson mic. They use it on so many, Bruce Sweden uses it on so many songs with Michael Jackson. Ooh, cold coffee. I don't recommend that though. Not my thing. I've been thinking about SM7B for vocalists, my GA Pre-73. I love the GAP Pre-73s. We used to have 8 of them. When we went up to the console, we rearranged our patch bays. We decided to go a different route, so we got rid of a lot of that stuff. But I used them for years. I've done some correspondence with Bo on different things, and they sent us stuff to use a few times. Fantastic stuff. Matter of fact, I still have a pair of Comp 54s over here in my rack that I love. On guitars, it's my favorite, actually. Great mid-range on them. And yeah, that's plenty of gain, man. You can do a lot. With those GAPs, man, you're not going to run out of gain. Trust me. Do I enjoy buying cheap mics or other gear on eBay for steal? Man, I love finding something cheap that works. Whether it's drums, whether it's gear. I love it when I find a cheap... here. Case in point. Right over here to my right. You can't see it, but in my other rack, I have an Alesis 3630. Yes, I said it. I own an Alesis 3630. I use it all the time. It's my favorite drum parallel compression compressor. It's thick, it's gooey, it's punchy, and I bought it for $40. I think on eBay, actually. It wasn't Craigslist. I think I got that on eBay. But same, I've got some snare drums that I bought for $40 that we use all the freaking time. So I love finding cheap gear that sounds good. I am one of those people that do not think that price tag is the only thing that makes something good. I don't. I think there's a lot of things that are a couple $100, or like my 3630, $45 that works great for the job I have it on there. If I went out and bought a $4,000 compressor, would it do better? It definitely sound different. Maybe work better on some things, but I don't think you have to spend that to get the job done that you need to get done at all. So yeah, let's find some deals, man. Totally. Do I leave the compressors on? Regal Beagle, are you asking? Is the question? Do I leave my 2-bus on while I'm mixing? I'm looking for the first part of your question there. I don't see it. Can't find it. Where'd it go? If you're talking about the 2-bus stuff, yeah, I leave that on while mixing. I mix into it from the get-go, right away. And I also don't, but even if I'm mixing in the box, I'm running out to that's my 2-bus. And the way I do that is I'm not putting it on my insert on the console. I'm actually pushing into it. So in essence, my master fader over here on the console just becomes my level of what's getting pushed into the compressor. So my final actual fader is my level on the C1. I notice when you can, let's see. Edgar Arias, nice, dude. Cheap and hey, as long as you're getting the sounds you want, man, who cares how much it costs? Just get the gear that you want to get to make the recordings that you want to make. Stan, I noticed that when you can push people beyond their limits, they don't really care about your cheap eBay gear. No, they don't. You know, the people that really just want to make things sound right will look past the gear. Me being a studio owner and I have people come in, a lot of the times, unfortunately, they see with their eyes. So the first thing they're looking for is something they've seen before or used, whether they've actually used it extensively and really know what it can do or not, you know. They're looking for those pieces of gear that they think every studio should have. You know, I've even had clients come in, they've heard what they liked, and they came in to see the studio, and they came in based on what they heard, and then it all switched to what they've seen. You know, oh, there's no distressor. No, we can rent one. It's not a big deal. But I agree with you. I think when you have people that really just either trust you or are open, they're not as worried about what the gear is. They're going to use their ears going to tell them. And that's what everybody should do in the first place. Is it better to keep overhead mics equidistant from the kick or the snare drums? Does it make a noticeable difference? Because an old school engineer insists on the kick. It depends on what you're going for. The type of setup I do with the overheads, I do it both. It's equidistant from the kick and the snare. If you're going to go one over the other, I'd say snare drum. Especially if it's modern music and say you're doing spaced pairs, I would say snare drum because it's going to be more prominent than the kick in the overheads. Unless you're only doing 2 microphones, then or 3, maybe you're doing a kit front and 1 overhead or a kit front and a pair of overheads, then you've got to play with it a little to get both in there because you don't want it pulling to the side. If you go check out some of the overhead videos in the Recording Ninja Workshop playlist on the YouTube channel, you'll see I go through my setup, or in my mastering overheads video that I have for purchase, I go through all of that. It's like 65 minutes of all those different things, and I talk about that. But I would say snare drum first, kick drum second, because for me, I'm going to probably roll a little of the low end out of the overheads. Not a ton, but maybe up to 100 hertz, maybe up to 110. Because my overheads aren't cymbal mics. My overheads are overall kit, but probably not the best bass drum sound coming into my overheads. And also, it's a long way away, so it's probably going to start to add a bit of a tail onto my kick mics that I don't necessarily want. So I might roll a touch of that out anyway. So I'm going snare drum. And I would say a lot of old school guys are snare drum as well. You know, you'll hear a lot of, or maybe early R&B, if they were doing coincident pairs, X, Y, and whatnot, are centered off the kick. You know, those guys. So you would, if you soloed up the overheads, you might hear the snare pulling to one side. You know, and this is a can of worms too, but it's a great discussion. When you hear things in context, some of these things that are issues in solo go away. And I think that's an important point to make, that we need to make sure we're referencing this stuff in context of what we're recording too, meaning what our music is. Because you could solo up the overheads, for instance, and say you hear the kick or the snare pull to one side because maybe you have a coincident pair and you center them over the snare drum. So you do hear the kick pull. Or maybe you have that coincident pair and you center it over the kick drum and you hear that snare drum pull a little bit. Of course you're going to hear that when you solo up those overhead mics. But are you going to notice it when it's with everything together? As long as it's not like super left right. Like you have a Glenn's John and Glenn John said you pan hard left, hard right. You're probably going to hear your microphone that's over the floor tom over. You're going to hear more low in there. It's going to pull like crazy to that side. But a lot of that stuff's going to go away. My personal miking setup is a little different. I took some stuff from George Massenburg, and then I measure mine equidistant from kick and snare, so they're both in there. But if I'm doing a basic spaced pair and I'm doing anything modern, I'm probably going to go off the snare drum before the kick drum. That's just what I've done on sessions or things I've needed to do. Your grandfather, not wrong, man. Matter of fact, if he's done it for a while, he's probably got some really cool tricks for you. Where we got here? Not a mullet in those videos, Stan. Mohawk. It's just down. No mullet. Haven't had a mullet since I was in high school. It's just my mohawk went all the way around. I didn't have it just on the top, man. I had it so it was up all the way, and it was long. So when it's down, you saw it hanging. No mullet, though. Is it? What exactly is parallel compression, and what do you use it for? Parallel compression is one of the coolest things on the planet, and actually, that's going to be the subject of some things coming up in the workshops, because there's a lot of different things you can use it for. Parallel compression is when you have two signals going at the same time. Say drums, for instance. Say you have all your drums grouped to, an aux channel, so everything's going here. And we send that over to another channel. So you have essentially two of the same thing, right? But channel number 2, we smack it with a compressor. We start getting crazy with it. Maybe we're squashing it. Maybe we want to add density, so we have some fast attack, slow release. Maybe we want punch, so we have medium to slower attack, fast release, whatever way. You'll do that. And actually, I do a little bit of that in the next video that's in part 3 of the Mixing in the Box that will be out either today or tomorrow. And you have those going on at the same time. So we have one channel that's, for the most part, unprocessed. Or maybe there's just a little bit of containment compression. The second channel of the same thing going at the same time, we heavily compress. And we have both of those going on at the same time. That is parallel compression. Think of it like streets. You have streets that run parallel to each other. But if you take either one of those streets, they will get you from one side of the city to the other, because they're going parallel, right? It's the same. That's kind of what parallel compression is. Two things going the same direction, doing the same, but they can be doing different things. One would be unprocessed, one would be processed. That's probably the most basic. Now, on drums, you can add tons of punch. You can add density to your sound. Vocal, you can have one nice vocal track that's not squashed, so you can leave some of your dynamics in it, and then you could have a parallel signal that's compressed like crazy, that doesn't move at all. Maybe you even limit it, and maybe your EQ is a little more radical on it, or maybe you could have one that's compressed like crazy and a third one that is EQ'd and maybe compressed like crazy. So you add the compressor, just dial it in a little bit to your natural sound, so things start to sound a little more even but not unnatural. And then maybe your third one has some radical EQ. Maybe you want it to cut, or maybe you need to add some body, and then you just blend that in a little bit. Parallel. So you're not radically treating your main vocal, so you don't make it sound unnatural. You do that with your parallel compression, parallel EQ. Does that make sense? Stan, no worries, dude. You're not the first person to think that. That was the hard thing with that mohawk was over a foot long, and when it was down, it could, look like a mullet. No biggie. But 1815, does that make sense with the parallel compression? And you can use it on everything. Bass, I've even used it on the master bus before sometimes. Although I find most of the time I don't do it there. But a lot of times bass, drums, it's so freaking handy, because you can get a drum sound to punch and cut through a mix without having to try to just over push your main drum bus to where maybe you start to have peaking problems. You can get it setting right, getting set nice, things sound natural, thick, good, and then you use your parallel signals to add that punch and add that thickness and drive it through the same way I would on a vocal. And I use that stuff a lot, actually. A lot. What time is it? 4:22. Man, we've been on here over an hour. Any last minute questions you got going on? You guys, I want to thank everybody for joining me on this. A lot of fantastic questions. We're going to do some more acoustic stuff. We'll talk about that. I do have some things we'll talk about more parallel compression come up, because I think that's a great topic and can be useful in many aspects of mixing. And you know what? I use it recording sometimes too. So we should go over that. The gear questions I think are great ones. Because you gotta have good enough gear to get what you want, but you don't let the gear get in the way of what you're trying to record. But also, you know what? Dinner. What's for dinner? You know what? I'm probably gonna go Chipotle a little bit later. I love Chipotle. That's why I need a sponsorship with Chipotle. But the gear should be something that allows you to get the end result you need and is fun to use. Because at the end of the day, all of this has to be fun. And if it isn't, we're probably not going to get the end result we need, because we're not enjoying it well. And I Like for me working on this console, it's fun, man. For me going over here on my C1 or my Tonelux, it's fun. And that is important. Really, really important. How big is my control room? It is, in the front, it's 16 feet wide. In the back, it is 19 feet wide. I have my walls on the front side are slightly angled, and it's about 20 feet long, I think, if I remember. And I have 12-foot ceilings, so it's a decent sized control room, for sure. You guys, thank you again. I really appreciate you joining me. If there's anything I can do, I'm always here to help. You know, we are doing we have a donation button in the bottom. We're actually upgrading some of our gear. We're trying to bring even more content. If there, any little bit helps from you guys, not necessary whatsoever at all, man. Gonna try to do as much as I can anyway, but every little bit helps keep it consistent and upgrade. We actually installed a switcher last night that we're trying to get involved in our setup to make things a little bit better. Also, if you have specific questions to your stuff, I do consulting, and I have some really affordable lessons that we can do, whether it's recording, mixing, patchbays setup. You're looking to buy gear, we can really dive into your setup. There's a link in the description for that stuff too. Please take advantage of that. It's priced to be affordable for everyone. I know we're on budgets and we need to get the answers we need. We might not always have the money to spend, so I priced them accordingly. But I do want to say thanks to everybody. I think you guys all rock a ton. And please, as we're going through this, share what you guys have going. The next video is going to be coming out either today or tomorrow, as soon as I can get the edit done. You'll see it up there. And then I'll see you next Wednesday. I'm still waiting on a piece of gear to announce what next Wednesday is going to be. If I don't have it by Monday, I have a plan B, but I had something special planned for next Wednesday. We'll see if this stuff shows up in time. So anyway, you guys, have a great weekend. You're all fantastic, and I will see you in the next few days.